Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I'm here to take a look at the Magic the Gathering Vivien Planeswalker deck for Core Set 2019. Vivien is a new Planeswalker created specifically for Core Set 2019, and unlike previous Planeswalker decks, this one is monocolor, being just green. According to the back, it's Vivien of the Arkbow that's in here. Vivien is a keen naturalist. Her magical Arkbow preserves the essence of each creature she encounters, allowing her to summon them at need, master the wilds, and crush your opponents with massive creatures. You get a deck box, a ready-to-play 60-card deck, one 15-card booster pack, a strategy insert, and a magic quick reference card. Now note that this deck only has one booster pack in it. That is down from 2 from previous Planeswalker decks, but the MSRP of these decks have also been decreased to account for the fact that this has one less booster pack. So it's not actually that bad of a thing. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. So this is the Vivien of the Arkbow Planeswalker. It is 6 mana for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker, and when you +2, you get 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature, so it's a buff. -3, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to a target creature you don't control. So it's better than a fight effect. It just lets your creature hit another creature and remove from the game. And -9, creatures you control gain +4/+4 and gain trample until the end of the turn. So that is a way, if you've established a board, for your creatures to swing in for a lethal. And that is not too bad of a Planeswalker as far as these fixed intro Planeswalkers go. It does what a lot of green decks want to do. Here's our deck box with some cool Vivien artwork on it. Inside we have the deck. We have a booster pack as advertised. There is a quick reference guide. And this is the same quick reference guide that has been in these Planeswalker decks since Kaladesh, as per the artwork down here. It contains some information on how to cast spells, what the different card types are, what the mana types are, and what makes them, and then how to set up the game, how to win the different parts of the turn as well. This is only useful for players that already kind of know how to play the game, but just need reminders specifically about these different steps. And this kind of information here as well. It's not very good for first-time players or early players because they really should have another player holding their hand, or at least a video game version of this game holding their hand. And then once you learn how to play the game, this is completely useless. So this is a very limited use for a very certain type of player, but that is the type of player that might purchase one of these decks, so I understand why it's in here. This is our strategy insert. It tells us not to open the booster packs and upgrade the deck until you've played it a few times to figure out what's going on. Playing the deck here tells you that basically it's a ramp deck. And you know what? The description is fairly valid for what you want to do with a ramp deck. So I appreciate that this is straightforward in telling you what to do with this deck. I do think that it would be much better if it tells you what creatures that you're looking for and actually name them, and then what the payoffs are that you're looking for. But as a generic description, it's not too bad. I just wish that it contained deck tech with information on all the cards in the deck and what you're trying to do with each of those cards. There's also a URL here for Planeswalker rules, and it's really annoying that you have to type in all this information in order to learn how to play a Planeswalker card. It really should be printed on this instead of having to type this into your search bar to get to this website. So I'm not a fan of that. There is information about some of the mechanics and rules that you might encounter in this deck. Upkeep is really strange because that's something that should be covered in your quick reference guide, and so it's strange that it's also here as well. And then there's a little bit of information about Vivien here. She actually gets a couple more lines than other Planeswalker decks, and that is nice, but I kind of wish that there were more story here to go along with this cool artwork. The back just has some ads on it, and that's a little disappointing considering how scant the information in this strategy insert is. Let's take a look at the deck. The rare here is the Pelakka Worm. It is a 7 mana 7/7 with trample, and when it enters the battlefield you get 7 life, and when it dies you draw a card. So this used to be an uncommon, I think, back in the Rise of the Eldrazi set, and it was very powerful then, and it's still pretty powerful now. It's been upgraded to a rare for M19, and it's a good payoff for getting to 7 mana if you can. The other rare is an Aggressive Mammoth. For 6 mana you get an 8/8 with trample and gives you all your other creatures trample. It's a pretty powerful card for decks like these in particular, and at this very casual power level. And if you've picked up the green welcome deck, this is going to be the rare in that welcome deck. So you might already have it, or you might be familiar with it. But it's fairly basic, but it's also something that really plays into what this deck is trying to do. And then for Vivien's searching rare, we have Scholar Wolf for 5 mana. You get a 3/3, which is a little overcosted, but when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a green card from among them and put it into your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is actually fairly decent in the fact that you get to draw a card, and not just any card, but one of your green cards from the next 5 cards in your library. And so that gives you a bit of card selection as well, in addition to drawing a card. And that makes this good. It is different from previous Planeswalker rares, which would actually search the graveyard and the library for the Planeswalker in the deck. So it does feel like a bit of a downgrade in some ways. But then again, being able to search for whatever card you want instead of just the Planeswalker does allow for some more flexibility as well, at least in the next 5 cards, and as long as you don't whiff on when you draw and look at those 5 cards. It's not a bad rare, and it is a body at least, so you get something for your mana. There are 26 forests in this deck. Vivien's common is Ursine Champion. You get a 2/2 for 2, and it's a human berserker, and then once you have 6 mana, you can activate it once on your turn to give it +3/+3 and make it a bear berserker until end of turn. So once you have a bunch of mana, you can turn this into a 5/5 once a turn. I mean, it costs a lot, so you're not going to be doing it very frequently. But it is a 2/2 that becomes something better later in the game, and that's not bad. And then Vivien's uncommon is Vivien's Jaguar. It's a 3 mana 3/2 with reach, so it can block flying creatures. And for 3 mana, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand if you control a Vivien Planeswalker. So that actually gives this card a bit of recursion and makes it fairly decent, because even if it were to die early on, once you play Vivien, you can actually return it from your graveyard to your hand. So as far as uncommons go, I actually kind of like this, even though it doesn't really play into the themes of the deck as a ramp deck. So what do I think about this deck? Well, I have to play it a few times, and I'm going to do just that, and then I'll be back to let you know what I think about this deck. So I got to play with this deck a bit, and I have some thoughts. The first observation that I'd like to make is that this is very clearly a ramp deck. It has a curve that is high in low drops and high in expensive creatures, and then very little in the middle. In fact, there are only 2 cards that have a converted mana cost of 4, and they are the 2 Bristling Boars. So that is what this deck is trying to do, and you can see it in the fact that it has 2 Druids of the Cowl and 2 Elvish Rejuvenators. However, the problem is that this deck isn't really down with the ramp plan, because it only has 4 cards that are ramping, and with a deck that has this many expensive cards in it, you really want to have a little bit more that will help you get to cast these things earlier. With only 4 cards, you have a chance of seeing 1, maybe 2 in the early game, and that's going to give you maybe 1 or maybe a 1-turn advantage on average over your opponent in terms of being able to cast expensive spells. And there is only 1 Colossal Majesty. Now, this plays into what the deck is trying to do in terms of getting big creatures and then using that for card advantage, but there's only 1 of them in this deck. The Oaken Form doesn't seem to make sense in this deck at all, given the fact that this deck is a ramp deck that has a whole bunch of big beasties. And I get the fact that Vivien herself is trying to make her smaller creatures bigger, and the Ursine Champion is an example of this, that if you get all this mana, you can use it to turn it into a 5/5, and so you have something to do with all that extra mana that you have. And so maybe the Oaken Forum is trying to play into the theme that Vivien has with her +1s, putting counters on a target creature. But a lot of times you don't really want to pump these up. These are the things that you're trying to reach, and you want to reach them faster. And so it feels a little weird that this deck is doing that, and also kind of weird that the Scholar Wolves, which are Vivien's 3/3 creatures that also cantrip, help you dig deeper for another green card, have 3 power when the Colossal Majesty is asking for 4 or more power. And the only creatures that really do that are everything over here, and the 2 Bristling Boars and the Thornhide Wolf. And I would have wanted maybe these to be 4 2s if necessary, so that they can at least get the benefit off the Colossal Majesty. But it doesn't even do that, and so it feels like a bit of a waste, all things considered, in terms of its design as far as power goes and how well it plays into this deck. The other card that I wish that were better designed were the Vivien's Jaguar. Now, it has reach, so it's one of these anti-flying things, but you have 2 plummets in this deck, and it's a very curious inclusion to put in the main board, but I understand that every single other Planeswalker deck from Core Set 2019 has some flyers in it, but you have the Vivien's Jaguars to deal with that, so why do you have the plummets in here? And do you really want to teach players to want to put plummets into their main deck? It doesn't seem like a good idea. And so I would have actually removed those and just maybe had some other creatures that had reach instead of Plummet. But the Vivien's Jaguar has reach, and then it has this ability that it recurs itself if you control Vivien. And that seems kind of weird when this isn't a black deck, and that's not really what green normally tries to do, and that's not even one of Vivien's powers. And so it seems like a bit of a strange design, all things considered, and I would have rather had this have maybe flash and act as an ambush or something like that, instead of this strange combination of abilities on that card. But the rest of the deck kind of makes sense for what it's trying to do. The payoffs are pretty good. You have a Pelakka Worm, which is a great payoff as a large trampler that even replaces itself if it dies, and you have Meteor Golems and Gaspark Twins and all that. And if the ramp were better, then I would have been happier with this deck, but for the most part, if you just want to ramp and play big dumb things, then this is kind of the deck for you. The other thing is that this deck has 26 lands, which I think is a thing with these Planeswalker decks, but I don't quite understand why this deck would want it when it has all this ramp. And so you're going to be drawing lands or drawing ramp, and I think the land should have been reduced to take into account for the ramp and teach players that if you have ramping cards, you don't need as many lands, because a couple of these will kind of replace one of these, and you don't want to be seeing these later. Those are really my only complaints about this. Obviously, this is not an incredibly powerful deck, but I think it does, for the most part, what it wants to do in terms of ramp you into big dumb things which you will use to beat down your opponents. If that's what you're looking for, this deck is one of your options. Let me know what you thought about this deck if you had a chance to play it in the comments below. If this video was helpful for you, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.